Hey guys, Akariss here, bringing you another analysis video, I guess, but on weapon refines this time. So here they are, a brand new set for the May 2020 year 2020. Alright, so I'm gonna do this probably a little bit different than maybe you're used to from previous refined videos, but still feel kind of the same. The idea here is I'll cover all the effects first, then I'll give you the builds, and then I'll kind of give them a kind of comparison of where I feel these units land now, where you should use them, where you should invest into them. So with that being said, let's jump into it. First up is Sig Bird. Sig Bird is, well, just watch the intro again, and that's pretty much my impression of Sig Bird. There's really little reason, if at all, to use him when there is just a unit that is mergeable and far better than him. And his refine is just better. It's just straight up is. His probably the most redeeming thing that he has is that he neutralizes enemy buffs. So that's kind of good, I guess. But I mean, you should have some form of panic on your team, whether that's panic ploy or sudden panic or whatnot. So honestly, this weapon is totally underwhelming and doesn't really put him in any sort of place at all when you consider that Elwood just does everything better. Sorry, that's a miss. Moving on, we got Leon. Leon is probably maybe the biggest winner of the batch of refines from my point of view. He's got a slaying kept in, but the slaying isn't the amazing part, it's the refine. The refine is pretty easy to meet that condition, over 50% HP, meaning he gets a bunch of stats without res, which is a little odd, but still good. And it's like the budding bow, like the inheritable bow that Armor Fae had. So that's really good. Sturdy impact, so to speak, an impact skill makes him really good. The HP condition is probably the one thing that is weird, because it means like if you want to run a Vantage build, you got to hover between 75 and 50% to get the extra stats, which do work on enemy phase. The impact skill is player phase oriented. This is a really good refine though, nonetheless. And yeah, I mean, bow units have had decent refines, but this one stands out, definitely for sure. Moving on, Gnar Sienna. I was hopeful that this refine would be better than it was. It's okay at best. It's healing. Healing is good. Healing is good for tanks. And it has a penalty condition which gives them a bunch of stats. And honestly, when I see a bunch of stats on a weapon, it's like, okay, so you caught up to more modern units or modern units. The bunch of stats pretty much means like, oh, I'm gonna be comparable to Minnie Minerva now or something. You know, that's really all it is. The healing is what is kind of unique about it, and I do appreciate that. Gnar Sienna does actually have a res stat for most Green Axe fires, so the healing means, along with the additional stats, means he actually could be usable as a tank. And finally, Wendy. Wendy is probably an odd case. I feel like most people see this and they're probably excited. I'm not really that excited because armors in general don't really have much use outside of potentially scoring an arena. They're not really the ideal units for PvE. They're not that great for AR either, whether that's offense or defense. So realistically, she doesn't really stand out, even with, no matter what this refine would end up. I just wouldn't really be that impressed. However, it is a good refine, and at least it makes her usable for those of you that already had plus 10 Wendy's. So if you already had a plus 10 Wendy, and if you didn't fully invest into her, then this is really good for her. It's pretty much like Odin's weapon. So anytime she gets hit, she just gets extra special acceleration on both phases. So that's really good combined with like Vengeful Fighter when she's hitting, or Bold Fighter on player phase, so she can have some presence. Now the fact that she has special acceleration means that you pretty much can get an ether on every single combat, whether that's player or enemy phase, depending on whether you use Bold Fighter or not. And that's really cool, very good for her. Defense and res means if you use something like Ignis or Bonfire, I guess, or whatever, Iceberg, depending on how your stats line up, she can do some damage, but her attack is already very low, and as a scoring unit, she's just underwhelming. I mean, Valbar is going to score more. Just going to score more, and there's other infantry units that are comparable. Astrum, Itsuki, Echidna, Ross, and the list will continue. So honestly, being a unit that scores at 170 is not impressive anymore, and this refine isn't going to put her in any interesting place. It's just nice to have a weapon given to an older unit like her. Okay, so with that being said, I will put all the weapon effects under me right there in case you forget them as we go through the builds. Builds themselves, we will start with Sig Bird. And, well, what I'm going to do with these builds is pretty much put one build per unit in where I feel the unit is best used. Like, that hero is best used in this content. You can pretty much use these units in any content you wish. It's up to you. But there is probably a best place to use them, and that's what I'll cover for the builds coming forward. As I said earlier, Sig Bird is pretty much a Gale Force unit. You get a bunch of attack and speed, that's good for Gale Forcing. However, special acceleration is required as of Heavy Blade. So like, you pretty much need Heavy Blade on him, unlike Elwood, which means that Elwood doesn't have so much trouble proccing the conditions or wasting skill slots for it. And therefore, he's just underwhelming. The solo part doesn't help him either, in my opinion. Like, you kind of don't want to use Wings of Mercy with him to follow up on Gale Force strategies for Aether Raid's offense, so it's not that great. I mean, honestly, he's hard to merge, and this doesn't really do much for him. Yeah, and you kind of need to use it on player phase, so you couldn't even do it on enemy phase either. I'm just not that impressed, guys. Sig Bird is still bad. Moving on. Leon. Now, Leon, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty good. I feel like his best place is defense. You could definitely use him on offense, though, for Aether Raids, and this comes from the fact that his weapon has impact on it. So impact on his weapon means that he's really difficult to tank. You pretty much need to use, like, no follow-up to stop it and then outspeed him, but his speed is actually pretty good. He gets extra speed from his weapon. You give him something like Fury 4 or Swift Sparrow 3, for instance, and he's very competitive in speed, which makes him a big threat. He could use something like Ignis or Bonfire, depending on where he is in the infantry pulse chain, and be in the back line. Considering his low res, he probably doesn't want to be near the front line when you have a lot of nukers, specifically magic base, that could snipe him. So Leon's best place, I feel, is going to definitely be defense with that weapon, and it's nice. Like, he's good. A definite threat to be there, along with like Kagero, depending on whether you've invested into him or not. Offense good, PV probably pretty good too, so good unit. Nothing really more to say for him. Moving on, we got Gnar Sienna. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Gnar Sienna's place is probably going to be a tank, and believe it or not, because he is high HP originally, it does make his HP good enough for AR offense. With all the HP creep being a thing for the buildings, like Panic Manners and so forth, kind of like checking HP, you're not going to run into the highest level versions of them yet, but having high HP is definitely important, so he does get that advantage should you fully invest in him. The fact that we've gotten so many copies of him means that it's pretty easy to have this without spending too many grails. I mean, you pretty much need like this encounter. Pulse Milk isn't required, obviously, and you got yourself a decent green flyer tank. Now, I feel like these type of units will age really well once flyers get more exclusive skills. In this timeline, you pretty much got Pegasus Flight, and I guess he could use it. He does have Resin Speed, but I don't know. You know, you need something better than Pegasus Flight. It's just, Pegasus Flight is an okay skill. It's not a great skill. Great skills like No Follow-Up, No See Destruct. You know, those are great skills. Those win you matches. Dual Ranged and Pegasus Flight, they could win you matches, but they're not consistently going to win you matches because you just might not run into that sort of stuff. So healing is nice, and the penalty effect is pretty easy to activate if you have some sort of like Imari weapon user on your team, or Sudden Panic, for instance, or Aversa. Very easy to activate that stuff, so his stats will be very good for that reason alone. Yeah, moving on, we got the last one of the table, which is Wendy. Wendy is, like I said, probably your standard arena unit, just not like, this isn't gonna work too well because the legendaries that you run into arena nowadays counter armors or have colors which beat her. So I chose Wind as an optimal place for her just because Wind is lacking in legendary heroes. You pretty much got like legendary Elwood there, and at least she has a color advantage there, or Lynn, who's a joke, or Lucina, who again is kind of outdated. So the Wind ones aren't too great yet, but as we get more, I totally expect Wendy to fall off, just like most armored characters do. The mobility is a weakness, but at least you can use Armor March, and the fact that she can activate Ether in pretty much every engagement, bar units having guard effects like Special Fighter, means that she's okay and you can just make use of an old unit without feeling bad. Even that though, I feel like maybe even a Slaying Spear would still be an optimal weapon in some matchups, because if you run into armors, that's where she'll win. So yeah, again, this pretty much just makes her an old unit better. Okay guys, with that being said, I'm gonna kind of go over them one last time and tell you what I feel like you should, why or how you should use them. So we'll start off with Sig Bird again. TLDR for Sig Bird, just don't bother. Just don't bother. It's not worth it. He's just outclassed by Elwood in everything and pretty much every content. I don't see a place for him, and unfortunately that's just how it's going to be with him. Leon, great defense unit, definitely worth considering as an investment, and if you like him, he's worth it. He stands out even compared to Legendary Alm, for instance, on a defense team, just with a different role. I mean, Fury Null follow-up impact all on one character is really annoying to deal with on defense and requires either Gale Forcing or Vantage to beat. Moving on, Gnar Sienna. With Minnie Minerva recently released, I kind of feel like he's not the greatest. He does have some staying power and he does have some stats which catch him up there, but honestly speaking, he's still kind of lacking, and the healing just feels like something that you just want to stall out enemies but not necessarily secure kills. And finally, Wendy. Wendy is unfortunately something I still wouldn't encourage investing into, even in this day and age. If you had like a mid-invested one or pretty much have a +10, then this is just a nice boost. But generally speaking, if you have copies of Valbar, you should go for that instead, or even just wait for an Effie refine, where I still feel like Effie could potentially be used in AR, at least for like Gale Force situations, or just her higher attack securing kill. So Wendy doesn't really do this yet. You need attack, and Wendy lacks there. Valbar scores a bit more, and there's other options that just aren't that, like Flame Emperor, for instance, is 180 at the cost of a decent amount of grails. So yeah, that pretty much covers all of them. Overall, I'm not super impressed by this batch. I think like the only one that stands out for me is definitely Leon, and that would be where you probably use him on defense if you really wanted to consider him for an infantry pulse team. So with that being said, guys, let me know what you guys think of these refines. Who are you still looking forward to getting a weapon refine in the near future? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video if you haven't already, please do, and subscribe as always. Thanks guys, much love, and peace.